They moved in silence, their shadows stretching long across the frozen white expanse like dark threads woven into an endless tapestry of snow. The cold was deep, but it was familiar. It was home. My name is Thomas, and I was there that morning. I was the outsider among them, the one who did not belong to this land of ice and silence. Yet they had taken me in when my ship broke apart against the frozen shores 6 moons ago. They had given me warmth when I had none. They had given me life when death was certain. If you enjoy stories of survival and tranquility, stories that carry you through frozen landscapes and quiet moments of human resilience, then subscribe to this channel. Press that button now, and let these tales of ice and endurance become your companions in the still hours of the night. The leader of our group was a man named Anik. He was perhaps 50 winters old, though the cold had carved lines into his face that made him look both ancient and ageless. His eyes were dark and steady, like 2 small stones polished by centuries of Arctic wind. He never spoke more than necessary. Every word from his mouth was like a precious seal oil, saved and measured. Behind Anik walked his wife, Sedna. She was a woman of remarkable strength, carrying supplies on her back that would have broken many men I knew from my homeland. Her steps were sure and rhythmic, matching the pace her husband set without effort. Their son, Malik, walked beside me. He was 17, lean and quick, with eyes that noticed everything. It was Malik who had found me that first night, half buried in snow, my fingers turning blue, my breath coming in shallow gasps. He had not hesitated. He had simply lifted me onto his shoulders and carried me to warmth. We were 12 in total. 12 souls moving across the ice towards something I did not yet fully understand. Anik had said only that we were following the old trail, the path their ancestors had walked for generations beyond counting. There was food ahead, he said, there was shelter, there was survival. There. The pale light of dawn painted everything in shades of soft blue and gentle white. The sun, still low on the horizon, seemed reluctant to rise fully, as if it too respected the stillness of this place. In my homeland, dawn was a time of noise and activity. Here it was sacred. Here it was quiet. I had learned many things in my 6 moons among these people. I had learned that silence was not emptiness, but fullness. I had learned that the cold was not an enemy, but a teacher. I had learned that survival was not about fighting nature, but about understanding it. But there was still so much I did not know, and what waited for us at the end of this trail would test everything I had learned. The ice beneath our feet was thick and old. Anik had taught me to read it, to understand its groans and whispers. Young ice sang high notes, thin and dangerous. Old ice hummed low and deep, solid and trustworthy. This ice hummed. It was safe. We walked for 2 hours before Anik raised his hand. We stopped immediately, all of us, without question. In this land, hesitation could mean death. When the leader stopped, everyone stopped. Anik knelt down and pressed his ear to the ice. His face was calm, concentrated. The rest of us waited, our breath forming small clouds that drifted upward and disappeared. After a long moment, Anik stood. He looked at his wife, and something passed between them. A look that carried more meaning than 100 words. Sedna nodded slowly. Anik turned to address us all. His voice was low but clear, carrying easily across the still air. "The seals are moving," he said. "They are 3 days ahead. We must follow." 3 days. 3 more days of walking across this endless white world. 3 more days of cold and ice and silence. But in his voice there was no complaint. There was no frustration. There was only acceptance. This was the way of things. The seals moved and they followed. It had always been so. I thought of my old life then. I thought of the ship that had brought me here, the merchant vessel called the Northern Star. I thought of Captain Williams, a hard man with hard eyes, who had promised us all riches from the Arctic trade. I thought of the crew, 40 men who had laughed and cursed and dreamed of returning home with full pockets. They were all gone now, all of them, swallowed by the ice and the sea. Only I remained. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wondered why. Malik touched my arm, pulling me from my thoughts. He gestured forward. The group was moving again. I nodded and fell into step beside him. "You were far away," Malik said quietly. His English was imperfect, but growing stronger each day. I had been teaching him, and he had been teaching me his language in return. "I was remembering," I said. "The ship." "Yes, the ship, the men." Malik was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The ice takes, the ice gives. This is the way." Simple words, but they carried a truth that had taken me months to begin to understand. The hours passed slowly, measured not by clocks, but by the movement of the pale sun across the sky. We stopped twice to rest, to eat dried fish and drink water from skin pouches, kept warm against our bodies. The food was simple but sustaining. I had long since stopped craving the bread and meat of my homeland. This food, their food, was what kept us alive. During our second rest, I sat beside an elder named Tuluk. He was the oldest among us, perhaps 70 winters, though he moved with a strength that belied his years. Tuluk was the storyteller of the group. In the evenings, around the small flames of oil lamps, he would share tales of the ancestors, of the spirits that lived in the ice, of the great hunts of long ago. "You are thinking too much, Thomas," Tuluk said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "How do you know? Your shoulders are tight, your breath is short. When a man thinks too much, his body shows it." I forced myself to relax, to let the tension drain from my muscles. "Better," Tuluk said. "The ice does not care about your thoughts. It only cares about your actions. Think less, watch more, feel the ice beneath you, feel the air around you. Be here, not in the past." It was good advice, advice I tried to follow every day. We resumed our walk as the sun reached its highest point, still low on the horizon, but bright enough to make the snow glitter like scattered diamonds. The beauty of this place never failed to move me. In my homeland, we spoke of harsh winters and cruel cold, but there was nothing cruel about this land. It was simply what it was: vast, ancient, indifferent, and in that indifference there was a strange kind of peace. Anik led us along the coastline, where the ice met the dark water of the sea. The water was calm today, barely moving, reflecting the pale sky like a great mirror. Sometimes we could see shapes moving beneath the surface. Seals, perhaps, or fish. The sea was full of life, even here in this frozen place. Malik pointed to a formation of ice rising from the frozen surface ahead. It was tall and jagged, sculpted by wind and time into something that almost looked like a great bird with outstretched wings. "Ice spirit," Malik said. "Good sign. Your people believe the ice has spirits?" "Not believe. No, the ice is alive, Thomas. It speaks, it moves, it remembers." I looked at the ice formation with new eyes. In the pale light, it did seem almost alive, almost watchful. We passed beneath it, and I felt a strange sensation, like the air itself was holding its breath. But then we were beyond it, and the feeling faded. The trail we followed was not visible to my untrained eyes, but Anik saw it clearly. He saw the subtle depressions in the snow where others had walked before. He saw the marks on the ice where sleds had passed in seasons past. He saw the patterns in the wind-blown surface that told a story of movement and migration. This trail had been walked for thousands of years. Generations of Anik's ancestors had moved along this same path, following the seals and the seasons, living in harmony with a land that would kill the unprepared without mercy. I was learning to see it too, slowly, day by day. The ice was beginning to reveal its secrets to me. As the afternoon wore on, the sky began to change. Thin clouds moved in from the west, painting the pale blue with streaks of grey and white. Anik studied the sky with a frown. "Storm," he said. "Tomorrow, maybe the day after. We need to find shelter before it comes." Shelter. In this vast expanse of ice and snow, shelter seemed an impossible dream. But I had learned that Anik always knew where to find it. We quickened our pace, moving faster now, but still maintaining the steady rhythm that conserved energy. Panic had no place here. Haste could kill as surely as cold. 2 more hours of walking brought us to something I had not expected. A small island, rising from the ice like a dark stone set in a white sea. It was perhaps a mile across, its rocky surface covered with snow, but clearly solid ground beneath. "Summer camp," Malik explained. "We stay here, many times before." As we approached the island, I could see the remains of old shelters, stone circles where tents had been pitched, fire pits blackened by countless flames. This place had been used by Anik's people for generations, a waypoint on their eternal migration across the ice. We made camp quickly, working with practiced efficiency. The women set up the tents, large structures made of seal skins stretched over frames of bone and driftwood. The men secured the supplies and began preparing food. I helped where I could, my movements still clumsy compared to theirs, but improving. 6 months ago, I had been useless, a burden they carried out of kindness. Now I could contribute, I could help. The tent I shared with Malik and 2 other young men was warm despite the cold outside. An oil lamp burned in the center, its small flame providing both light and heat. The seal skins blocked the wind completely, creating a pocket of comfort in the frozen world. That night, Tuluk told a story. We gathered in the largest tent, all 12 of us, sitting in a circle around the old man. The lamplight flickered across his weathered face, casting shadows that danced like living things. "Long ago," Tuluk began, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of ancient telling, "before the grandfathers of our grandfathers were born, there lived a young hunter named Amaruk. He was strong and brave, but he was also proud. Too proud. The tent was silent. Even the wind outside seemed to quiet, as if listening. Amaruk believed he could hunt alone. He believed he did not need his people, did not need the wisdom of the elders. One winter, when the seals were scarce and the people were hungry, Amaruk set out by himself. He said he would find food where others could not. He said he would prove his worth." Tuluk paused, letting the silence build. Amaruk walked for many days. He followed the ice far beyond where the people usually traveled. He found seals, yes, many seals, but alone he could not hunt them. Alone he could not carry the meat back to his people. And alone, when the storm came, he had no one to help him find shelter. The old man's eyes moved around the circle, meeting each of ours in turn. Amaruk survived that storm, but only barely. He crawled back to his people more dead than alive, his pride broken like thin ice. And from that day forward, he never hunted alone again. He learned what his pride had hidden from him, that in this land we survive together or we do not survive at all. The story ended, but its meaning hung in the air. I felt it settle into my bones, joining all the other lessons this land and these people had taught me. Together. Survival was not a solitary act, it was a collective one. I looked around the tent at the faces of those who had become my family. Anik, steady and strong. Sedna, tireless and kind. Malik, curious and eager. Tuluk, wise and patient. And the others, each one essential, each one valued. They had saved me not because I deserved it, but because that was their way. They did not leave people to die alone in the ice. They did not abandon those in need. I'd come from a world where people stepped over the hungry in the streets, where the weak were scorned and the different were feared. These people, these so-called primitives that men from my homeland looked down upon, had shown me a better way. The night deepened, and one by one the group settled into sleep. I lay in my tent, wrapped in furs, listening to the wind outside. It was growing stronger, just as Anik had predicted. The storm was coming. But I was not afraid. I was with people who knew this land, who understood its dangers and its gifts. I was no longer alone. Sleep came slowly, but it came. And my dreams were filled with ice and light and the endless white horizon. The storm arrived the next morning. It came not with sudden fury, but with gradual intensity, the wind building hour by hour, the snow thickening until the world beyond our tents disappeared entirely. We stayed in our shelters, conserving energy, waiting. There was no impatience among the group. This was simply part of life here. Storms came. You waited. Eventually they passed. I spent the hours talking with Malik, learning more of his language, sharing more of mine. He was fascinated by my homeland, by the tall ships and crowded cities I described, but he had no desire to see them. "Too many people," he said. "Too much noise." "How do you hear yourself think?" It was a good question, one I had never considered before. "Maybe we do not," I admitted. "Maybe that is why we are always so restless." Malik nodded, as if this confirmed something he had suspected. The storm lasted 2 days. 2 days of howling wind and driving snow, 2 days of darkness and close quarters. But there was no conflict, no frustration. The group passed the time with stories and games, with sleep and quiet conversation. Sedna taught me how to repair a tear in a seal's skin. Tuluk told more stories of the ancestors. Anik sat in silence for long hours, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. "What does your father do when he sits like that?" I asked Malik. "He listens to the ice. He feels the storm. He knows when it will end." "How can he know?" Malik shrugged. "He just knows. His father knew. His father's father knew. It is in the blood." On the morning of the 3rd day, Anik opened his eyes and spoke. "The storm ends today. We leave at midday." And he was right. By midday the wind had died to a whisper. The snow had stopped. The world emerged from the white curtain of the storm, fresh and clean and sparkling in the pale sunlight. We broke camp quickly, packing our supplies, taking down the tents, leaving no trace of our presence except the ancient stone circles that had been there for centuries. The trail continued. And so did we. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. We walked during the light hours, covering as much ground as the conditions allowed. We rested when Anik decided we should rest. We ate when food was available. We slept when darkness came. My body grew stronger. My eyes grew sharper. I began to see things I had been blind to before. The subtle changes in the ice that warned of danger. The tracks of animals that told stories of their passing. The patterns in the sky that foretold weather. On the 5th day after the storm, we reached the edge of open water. The sea stretched before us, dark and vast, dotted with floating ice, and in the water we saw them, seals, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Their sleek heads bobbed above the surface, their dark eyes watching us with curiosity. Anik smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile since we began our journey. "We have found them," he said. "Now we hunt." The hunt was not what I had expected. There was no excitement, no shouting, no chaos. It was calm and methodical, conducted with a reverence that bordered on the sacred. Anik explained the process to me in the quiet hours before we began. "The seal gives itself to us," he said. "It chooses to die so that we may live. We do not take. We receive, and we honor the gift with gratitude and respect." This was not the hunting I knew from my homeland, where men boasted of their kills and displayed their trophies with pride. This was something different, something older, something better. The hunters went out in pairs. Anik went with his son Malik. Tuluk, despite his age, went with a younger man named Kipak. The others paired off according to experience and skill. I was paired with Sedna. She would not hunt. Her role was to prepare the catch, but she would teach me to watch, to learn, to understand. We found a position on a rocky outcrop overlooking the water. From here we could see everything. The hunters approaching the water's edge, the seals swimming and diving, the dance of survival playing out before us. Enoch moved first. He approached the water slowly, his steps silent, his body low. In his hand he held a harpoon, its bone point gleaming in the pale light. He waited, patient, still, like the ice itself. A seal surfaced nearby, perhaps 20 feet from the shore. It did not see Anik, or perhaps it did and was not afraid. Perhaps it understood what was about to happen and accepted it. Anik threw. The harpoon flew true, striking the seal cleanly. There was no struggle, no prolonged suffering. The seal's life ended quickly, with minimal pain. Anik waded into the shallow water and retrieved his catch. He said something in his language, words I did not understand, but recognized as a prayer of thanks. The hunt continued throughout the day. 7 seals were taken in total, 7 gifts received with gratitude, 7 lives honored with respect. That night, we feasted. The seal meat was divided equally among the group, with extra portions given to the elders and children. Nothing was wasted. The skins would become clothing and shelter. The bones would become tools. The fat would become oil for lamps and cooking. Tuluk presided over a ceremony of thanks. He spoke words in the old language, words that had been spoken after every hunt for thousands of years. The group listened in reverent silence. "The seal is our brother," Tuluk said, switching to English for my benefit. "It gives us life. We honor it. We thank it. We remember it." I found myself moved by the ceremony, by the genuine gratitude these people showed for the animal that sustained them. In my homeland, we ate without thought, without thanks. We took without giving. We consumed without considering. Here, there was balance. Here, there was connection. Here, there was meaning. We stayed at the water's edge for 3 more days, hunting and processing the catch. The seal meat was preserved in the cold, packed carefully for the journey ahead. The skins were cleaned and prepared for later use. The fat was rendered into oil. I worked alongside the others, learning each step of the process. My hands grew skilled at tasks they had never performed before. My understanding deepened with each passing hour. On the morning of the 4th day, Anik announced that it was time to move on. "The ice is changing," he said. "We must continue before the thaw makes travel dangerous." The thaw. I had heard them speak of it before. In the coming months, the ice would begin to melt. Paths that were safe now would become treacherous. Open water would appear where solid ground had been. We had to reach our destination before the thaw caught us in the open. The pace quickened. We walked longer hours, rested less frequently. The supplies we carried were heavier now, laden with preserved seal meat, but no one complained. This was survival. Comfort was secondary. As we traveled, I noticed changes in the landscape. The flat white expanse of the ice gave way to ridges and valleys, pressure formations created by the constant movement of the frozen sea. Some of these ridges were taller than a man, jagged walls of blue and white that we had to navigate around or over. Nick read these formations like a map, finding passages through the maze that seemed impossible to my untrained eyes. His knowledge of this land was encyclopedic, passed down through generations, refined by personal experience. On the 8th day of our journey from the hunting grounds, we encountered something unexpected. It began with Anik stopping suddenly, his hand raised in the signal for silence and stillness. We froze, every one of us, waiting. Anik pointed to the ice ahead. At first I saw nothing unusual, just more white, more snow, more frozen landscape. But then I saw what he saw. Tracks, large tracks, pressed deep into the snow. Tracks that could only belong to one animal, bear. A great white bear had passed this way recently. The tracks were fresh, the edges still sharp. Anik studied the tracks for a long moment. Then he turned to the group. "We go around," he said. "The bear is hunting. We do not want to meet a hunting bear." There was no argument. No one questioned the decision. We changed course, adding miles to our journey to avoid the bears' territory. I had heard stories of the great white bears. Tuluk had told me of their power, their cunning, their complete lack of fear. They were the true masters of this land, he said. Humans survived here by their tolerance, not their permission. We walked for hours, curving wide around the area where the bear had been. The detour cost us a full day of travel, but no one complained. Caution was wisdom here. Carelessness was death. That night the temperature dropped sharply. Even in our tents, wrapped in furs, the cold pressed in from all sides. I lay awake, listening to the ice groan and shift beneath us. It was a sound I had grown accustomed to, but tonight it seemed louder, more insistent. Malik was awake too. I could hear his breathing, shallow and alert. "Can you not sleep?" I whispered. "I'm listening," he replied. "To what?" "Everything." I tried to do the same. I closed my eyes and opened my ears, letting the sounds of the night wash over me. The wind, a constant presence, whistling across the ice. The groan of the frozen sea, adjusting to forces I could not see. The breathing of my tent mates, slow and steady, and somewhere, far in the distance, a sound I did not recognize. "What is that?" I asked Malik. He was silent for a moment, listening. "Wolves," he said. "Very far. Not a danger. Wolves. Another predator I had heard of but never seen. This land was full of creatures that could kill me without effort, and yet, strangely, I did not feel afraid. I felt aware. I felt alive. Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless, the kind of sleep that only utter exhaustion can bring. The next morning dawned clear and cold. We broke camp quickly, eager to make up the time lost to the bear detour. Anik set a brisk pace, and we followed without complaint. Around midday we crested a ridge and saw something that made my heart leap. Land, real land. Not an island or a rocky outcrop, but a vast expanse of solid ground, rising from the ice like a dark fortress. Mountains climbed into the sky in the distance, their peaks white with snow, their slopes dark with rock. "Home," Malik said, his voice soft with emotion. This was their destination, their winter camp, the place where they would wait out the coldest months, sheltered from the worst of the storms, sustained by the food they had gathered. But we were not there yet. Miles of ice still separated us from the shore, and those miles, Anik warned, would be the most dangerous of our journey. "The ice here is young," he explained. "The currents move it. We must be careful." Young ice, the ice that sang high notes, the ice that could crack and break without warning. We roped ourselves together, a precaution I had not seen before. Each person was connected to the next by a length of strong cord. If one fell through, the others could pull them out. The thought of falling through the ice into the dark water below filled me with dread. But I pushed the fear aside. Fear was useless. Caution was essential. We began the crossing. Anik led the way, testing each step before committing his weight. The rest of us followed in his exact footsteps, trusting his judgment completely. The ice groaned constantly here, a higher pitch than I was used to. It creaked and popped beneath our feet, protesting our presence, but it held. An hour into the crossing, there was a sharp crack to our right. We all froze, hearts pounding, eyes scanning for the source of the sound. A line appeared in the ice, perhaps 50 feet away, a fracture spreading slowly across the frozen surface. Anik did not panic. He studied the fracture, judged its direction, and adjusted our course accordingly. We moved left, away from the spreading crack, our steps quick but careful. The fracture stopped growing, the ice stabilized. We continued. Another hour passed. The shore grew closer, its dark bulk filling more and more of the horizon. We were going to make it. I could feel it. And then Tuluk fell. It happened without warning. One moment the old man was walking steadily behind me. The next there was a crack, a splash, and a cry of alarm. I turned to see Tuluk waist-deep in black water, the ice around him crumbling away. His eyes were wide but not panicked. Even now, facing death, he remained calm. The rope connecting us went taut as those ahead felt the drag. Anik shouted commands. The group spread out, distributing our weight across the ice to prevent further collapse. Kipak, the young man who had been paired with Tuluk during the hunt, dropped to his belly and crawled toward the hole. He extended his hand to the old man. "Take my hand, grandfather," he said. Tuluk reached up. Their fingers touched, then clasped. Kipak pulled. Others joined in, grabbing the rope, adding their strength. Inch by inch, Tuluk rose from the water. It took perhaps 2 minutes. 2 minutes that felt like 2 hours. But finally, Tuluk was out, lying on the solid ice, gasping for breath, his clothes already beginning to freeze. We moved fast. There was no time to waste. Wet clothes in this cold meant death. Sedna was already stripping off the old man's outer layers, replacing them with dry furs from our supplies. Others formed a windbreak with their bodies, shielding Tuluk from the biting breeze. Malik pulled me aside. "We must keep moving," he said. "The shore is close. We can build a fire there. But here, on the ice, we cannot help him more." He was right. We needed solid ground. We needed fire. Tuluk was wrapped in every spare fur we had. 2 of the stronger men lifted him between them, carrying him like a child. We abandoned some of our supplies to lighten our load. Speed was more important than goods now. The last mile to shore was the longest of my life. Every step felt like 10. Every breath was a prayer. And through it all, Tuluk remained conscious, his dark eyes open, his lips moving in a silent chant. When my feet finally touched solid ground, I nearly wept with relief. We found shelter in a small valley, protected from the wind by rocky walls. Wood was gathered, a fire was built. Tuluk was placed closest to the flames, his frozen clothes replaced entirely, his body wrapped in warm furs. Hours passed. The old man shivered violently at first, his body fighting to generate heat. But slowly, gradually, the shivering lessened. His color improved. His breathing steadied. As night fell, Tuluk opened his eyes fully and looked around at the group gathered around him. "I am not dead," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Not yet, old man," Anik replied with a rare hint of humor. Tuluk managed a small smile. "The ice tried to take me, but I am too stubborn to die in water. I want to die in bed, warm and comfortable, like a lazy seal." Laughter rippled through the group. The tension that had gripped us for hours finally released. Tuluk would live. We stayed in that valley for 2 days, allowing the old man to recover his strength. He was remarkably resilient for his age, bouncing back faster than I would have thought possible. By the 2nd day he was walking on his own, though he accepted help without complaint. During those 2 days, I had time to think, to reflect on everything that had happened, to consider how close we had come to losing one of our own. The ice had tried to take Tuluk, but the ice had not succeeded because we were together, because we worked as one, because no one hesitated when help was needed. Tuluk's story of Amaruk came back to me. The proud hunter who learned that survival was a collective act. I understood that story now in a way I could not have before. I had lived it. On the 3rd day we resumed our journey. The land here was different from the ice, solid ground beneath our feet, rocks and snow instead of frozen water. The going was easier in some ways, harder in others. We climbed hills and descended valleys. We crossed frozen streams and navigated boulder fields, but the worst was behind us. The dangerous ice crossing was complete. From here, the path to the winter camp was well known and well traveled. Anik's pace relaxed. There was no longer the urgency that had driven us before. We walked at a comfortable speed, enjoying the feeling of solid ground, the security of familiar territory. 4 days after leaving the coast, we arrived. The winter camp was nestled in a valley between 2 mountains, protected from the worst winds by the natural walls of rock. A stream flowed through the center, frozen now but sure to thaw in the coming months. Rocky outcrops provided shelter for building homes. It was, in its way, perfect. Others had arrived before us. Smoke rose from a cluster of dwellings at the valley's center. Dogs barked at our approach. Children ran out to greet us, shouting with excitement. Families were reunited. Friends embraced. The quiet of our small traveling group gave way to the bustle of a larger community. Dozens of people, perhaps 100 or more, gathered here from their different hunting grounds, coming together to survive the deepest winter as one. I stood at the edge of the gathering, uncertain of my place. These were not my people. This was not my culture. I was an outsider, a stranger from a distant land. But then Malik appeared beside me. He took my arm and led me into the crowd. "Come," he said. "You are one of us now?" And so I was welcomed. People I had never met greeted me warmly. They had heard of the shipwrecked stranger, the one Malik had saved from the ice. They were curious about me, about my homeland, about my strange ways. But there was no hostility, no suspicion, only acceptance. A dwelling was prepared for me, small, simple but warm. My own space within the larger community, a place to call home. That first night in the winter camp, there was a great gathering. The entire community came together around a central fire, sharing food and stories. Each traveling group reported on their journey, on the hunting, on the challenges they had faced. When it came to our group's turn, Tuluk told the story of his fall through the ice. He told it with humor and humility, making light of his own near-death experience. But he did not make light of those who had saved him. "I am here because of my people," he said, his eyes moving around the circle. "Because when the ice tried to take me, they would not let it. This is the way of our ancestors. This is what makes us strong. Alone, we are nothing. Together, we are everything." His eyes found mine across the fire. "And Thomas," he added, "the stranger from across the sea. He held the rope too. He pulled too. He is no longer a stranger. He is family." A murmur of approval ran through the gathering. Heads nodded. Faces smiled. I felt something warm bloom in my chest, something I had not felt in a long time. Belonging. The winter months passed slowly, but not unpleasantly. The darkness grew deeper, the cold more intense, but the community was prepared. The dwellings were warm, the food stores were full, the people looked after each other. I learned more than I could have imagined. I learned to build shelters that could withstand the fiercest storms. I learned to preserve food in ways that kept it edible for months. I learned to read the weather, the ice, the land. I learned to move through this world not as an outsider but as a participant. As Malik remained my closest friend and teacher. We spent hours together each day, sometimes talking, sometimes working in companionable silence. He was curious about my homeland, and I did my best to describe it. The cities with their tall buildings, the ships that crossed vast oceans, the machines that were beginning to change everything. But for all his curiosity, Malik had no desire to see these things for himself. "Your world sounds busy," he said once, "always moving, always building, always wanting more. What do your people search for?" It was a question I could not answer. What did we search for? Progress? Wealth? Power? Were those things worth searching for? Here the people searched for food, for shelter, for survival, simple things, essential things. And in that simplicity they found a contentment that seemed to elude the people of my homeland. The darkest part of winter was also the most magical. When the sun disappeared entirely for weeks on end, the sky came alive with lights. Great curtains of green and blue danced across the darkness, moving and shifting like living things. "The spirits of the ancestors," Tuluk told me, "dancing in the sky, watching over us, guiding us." I did not know if I believed in spirits, but I believed in the beauty of those lights. They filled me with wonder every time I saw them. As the weeks passed, the sun began to return. First just a glow on the horizon, then a sliver of light, then more and more, until the days were once again brighter than the nights. The thaw was coming. The ice would begin to melt, the trails would open, and the community would scatter once again, each family group heading to their summer hunting grounds. But before the dispersal came a great celebration, a festival of renewal marking the return of the light and the beginning of a new cycle. The celebration lasted 3 days. There was food and music and dancing. There were games and competitions. There were ceremonies honoring the ancestors and the spirits of the land. On the final night, Anik found me sitting alone on a rocky outcrop, watching the stars. "Thomas," he said, settling down beside me, "I have watched you these past months. You have learned well. You have become strong." "I have had good teachers," I replied. Anik nodded slowly. "The ice will melt soon," he said. "Ships will come to these waters, ships from your homeland. You could return to your people." I had thought about this. Of course I had. In the early months it was all I could think about. Going home, seeing familiar faces, returning to the life I had known. But now, after everything I had experienced, everything I had learned, the idea of returning felt strange, foreign, like going back to a place I no longer belonged. "I could," I said, "but I do not think I will." Anik was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded again. "The ice chose you, Thomas. It brought you to us for a reason. Perhaps that reason was to show you a different way of living. Perhaps it was to give you a new home." "Do you believe in such things? Fate? Destiny?" "I believe in the ice," Anik said simply. "I believe it knows things we cannot understand. I believe it gives and takes according to a wisdom older than any people." I thought about my ship, the Northern Star. I thought about Captain Williams and the crew. I thought about the ice that had crushed our hull and sent us all into the frozen water. The ice had taken them, but it had not taken me. Was that fate? Was that wisdom? Or was it simply chance, random and meaningless? I did not know. Perhaps I would never know, but I had made my choice. "I will stay," I said. "This is my home now." Anik placed his hand on my shoulder, a rare gesture from a man who seldom touched anyone. "Then welcome home, Thomas. Welcome home." The thaw came as predicted. The ice began to melt, slowly at first, then faster as the days grew longer and warmer. Streams flowed where solid ground had been. Open water appeared in places that had been frozen for months. Our family group prepared to depart. Anik and Sedna, Malik and Tuluk, myself and the others, who had made that long journey across the ice together. We would travel to the summer hunting grounds, following the animals that were our sustenance. On the morning of our departure, I stood at the edge of the valley and looked back at the winter camp. It was almost empty now, most families having already left for their own destinations. But the stone circles of the dwellings remained. The fire pits still smouldered. This place would be here when winter came again, and so would I. Malik appeared beside me as he so often did. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. I looked at the mountains rising around us. I listened to the sound of melting ice, the whisper of wind, the distant call of birds returning from warmer lands. "Ready?" I said. We set out together, our small group, following trails that had been walked for thousands of years. The ice was receding, but our path was clear. We knew where we were going. We knew how to get there. We knew what to do when we arrived. This was my life now. This was my world. And though it was harsh and demanding, though it offered no luxury and no ease, it was beautiful. It was meaningful. It was home. Months passed. Seasons changed. I lived through another summer, another autumn, another winter. Each cycle taught me more, deepened my understanding, strengthened my connection to this land and its people. I learned to hunt seals in the open water. I learned to track caribou across the tundra. I learned to read the ice with the skill of someone born to it. I was never as good as those who had been doing these things their whole lives. But I was good enough. And more importantly, I was part of something larger than myself. A community, a family, a people who had survived in this place for countless generations and would continue to survive long after I was gone. 3 years after my arrival, Tuluk died. He passed peacefully in his sleep during the darkest part of winter, surrounded by family and friends. He was the oldest member of our community, and his passing was felt by everyone. We did not mourn, as my people would have mourned. There were no wails of grief, no rending of garments. Instead, there was a celebration of his life. Stories were told, memories were shared. His body was returned to the land that had sustained him for so many years. "He is with the ancestors now," Malik said, "dancing in the lights." I looked up at the sky, at the green and blue curtains shimmering overhead, and for a moment I thought I could see him there. Old Tuluk, dancing with the spirits, watching over us still. As the years passed, I began to teach as well as learn. Young people came to me, curious about the wider world. I told them of ships and cities, of machines and customs. I did not glorify these things, nor did I condemn them. I simply shared what I knew, letting them form their own conclusions. Some were fascinated, some were skeptical. Most were content with the life they knew. I understood. I was content too. A decade passed. I grew older, my hair streaked with grey, my body marked by the demands of this hard life. But I remained strong. The cold that had nearly killed me that first night had become my constant companion. I no longer feared it. I respected it. And Nick passed away in my 15th year among the people. He died as Tuluk had, peacefully, in his sleep during winter. His death left a hole in our community that could never be filled. But his son Malik stepped into his father's role with grace and skill. The traditions continued, the cycles persisted. I am old now, very old. I have lived more than 40 years among these people, longer than I lived in my homeland. This is my world. These are my people. The ice is my home. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the long winter nights, I think about the Northern Star. I think about Captain Williams and the crew. I think about the life I might have lived if the ice had not brought me here. But I do not regret what happened. How can I regret something that gave me so much? A new family, a new purpose, a new understanding of what it means to be alive. The pale light of dawn is coming. I can see it through the walls of my dwelling, a subtle brightening of the darkness outside. Soon the sun will rise. Soon another day will begin. Malik's grandson, a boy named Siku, will come to me this morning. He is learning English, as his grandfather once did. He asks endless questions about the world beyond the ice. I answer them as best I can. But I also tell him other things. Things I have learned in my many years here. The importance of community, the value of patience, the wisdom of listening to the land instead of fighting it. "In your homeland," Siku asked me once, "do the people follow the ice?" I thought about the question for a long time before answering. "No," I said. "They try to conquer it. They try to control it. They do not understand that the ice cannot be conquered or controlled. It can only be understood." Siku nodded solemnly, processing this information. "Then they are not wise," he said. "No," I agreed. "Not in this way. But they are learning. Slowly. One day perhaps they will understand what your people have always known." "What is that?" "That we are part of the world, not masters of it. That the land gives us what we need if we treat it with respect. That survival is not about domination, but about harmony." Siku was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "I'm glad you came here, Thomas. I'm glad you learned our ways." "So am I, Siku. So am I." The dawn is breaking now. The pale light is spreading across the sky, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Another day is beginning in this land of ice and silence. I rise from my bed. I dress in my furs. I step outside into the cold, clean air. The ice stretches before me, endless and ancient, beautiful and dangerous. It has been my teacher and my home for more than 4 decades. It has taken much from me, but it has given me so much more. In the pale light of dawn, I follow the trail on the ice, just as the people of this land have always done, just as they will always do, and I am grateful for every moment, for every breath, for every lesson the ice has taught me. This is my story, not a story of struggle and drama, but a story of quiet survival, of adaptation, of finding a home in the most unexpected of places. If you have listened this far, thank you. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. Thank you for sitting in the silence and the cold and the pale light of dawn. If you enjoyed this story, if it brought you peace, if it helped you rest, then please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this one. Stories of ice and survival. Stories of quiet strength and enduring wisdom. Stories that will carry you through the still hours of the night. Until next time, be well, be warm. And remember, the ice gives and the ice takes, but those who listen to it will always find their way home.